We have with us Dr. Moumanti Poder. She is an assistant professor at IISER Pune. She obtained her PhD from NYU and has been a faculty at the University of Washington. Her research focuses on probability theory, including statistical mechanics, frequently combining combinatorial tools with mathematical logic. Today, she has a talk for us titled A Glimpse into the Fun World of Probabilistic Methods, in which she will discuss some examples of problems where introducing probabilistic methods in a problem that seemingly does not have any randomness can lead us to fun and neat solutions. Over to you, Professor.
Thank you so much. Hopefully I'm audible. That's a really nice introduction. Wow, thank you for that. Initially I thought I would give a slide talk, but then I feel like maybe I can communicate better if I give a board talk. And so these problems are, so a priori when you just state the problem, there is no probability in it, but somehow you create a suitable probability space. And from there you try to draw conclusions. And sometimes I'm not promising that it's always the case that you come up with neater solutions, but sometimes you do. So you probably have heard of the Ramsey numbers. If my handwriting is not visible or not legible, please let me know. Okay, so the idea is that, so in general, you can talk about Ramsey numbers of this form, but I will talk about the case where k is equal to L. Okay, so I'll be talking about Ramsey numbers of this form. So what is this? So take a graph, a complete graph on n vertices. Okay, so that's usually denoted by k sub n. So complete graph means that you have n vertices. Every pair of vertices is adjacent, connected by an edge. Okay, so there are n choose too many edges. And now you consider an edge coloring of this graph. So what that basically means is that you color the edges. So it's basically a map from the set of edges of k sub n to the set of colors. Okay, so in this particular case, we will consider an edge coloring with two colors. So let's say blue and red. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. So hopefully this is fine. Okay. So let's say you have one color is blue, the other color is red. And what you're asking for is, which is the theorem of Ramsey, is that, is there a positive integer n such that for n and all higher values, no matter how you choose to perform this edge coloring, there is either going to be a subgraph on an induced subgraph on k vertices, because it's induced and we are looking at complete graph here. So it's going to be a complete graph on k vertices, which is monochromatic. So it could be either a red k sub k or a blue k sub k. Okay, so the emphasis should be on the fact that no matter what edge coloring you choose, you are still going to end up with a monochromatic k sub k. Okay, so you want the guarantee that there exists a monochromatic k sub k. Okay? So a subset of k vertices such that the induced subgraph on those k vertices will have all its edges of the same color, either all blue or all red. Okay, and so the theorem of Ramsey basically says that yes, there exists such a positive integer n, such that for n and higher values, you do have this property. Okay, that you're guaranteed to have this. So no matter what the coloring. But of course, the challenge. So this is an existential claim, right? And then there comes the challenge of trying to find the minimum such positive integer n. So this RKK is the minimum such positive integer n for which this is true. Okay, so maybe I should write, no matter the coloring. So you can do whatever coloring you like, and still this is going to be true. So this is the minimum such n. Okay, and I don't remember off the top of my head how the throughout history, like how the literature on this has developed. But I do want to mention that this year, March, there has been a paper by Sir Rob Morris, Julian Sahasrabudhe, Simon Griffiths, and Marcelo, I forget his last name. So these 4 people, I think that's a he, Marcelo is probably a he, hopefully. So these 4 people actually showed that RKK is bounded above by a quantity like this for some epsilon positive, which they haven't specified. Okay, that's again, there is a computational aspect of this, but this is like the first exponential improvement on the bounds of this number since 1935. There were some such bounds obtained, exponential bounds obtained by Erdős and Zekres, and then after this, after 1935, 2023 is when you have the next big breakthrough in this. I just wanted to mention that this is like not part of the talk as such, because it's something to celebrate and something to probably, that's going to open up new avenues for research in this direction. So what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to get a lower bound on RKK using probability. Okay. So a priori in everything that we have talked about so far, there is no probability, right? You're talking about a complete graph, you're talking about colorings, there is no probability involved. Now we want to come up with a suitable probability space. So in this particular case, we will come up with a random edge coloring. Okay, that's what we're going to do. And then from there, we will try to draw the desired conclusion about some sort of lower bound for this number. Okay. So let's say you have your Kn. Okay, so this is given to you. And now you consider, is this visible or is it too bright? Is it okay? Okay. So you consider a random edge coloring. So what is that? It is a fairly obvious, I wouldn't say obvious, a fairly simple scheme of coloring, where so you basically color each edge. So there are, and choose too many edges, you take each of them, and then you color them independently. That's the first thing. So the coloring is independent over the edges. So color each edge independently. Okay. And now comes the distribution of the colors. So blue with probability half, okay, and red with probability half. Okay. So it's basically you take a fair coin for every edge. You take a fair coin, and these fair coins are all independent. Okay, and then you toss the coin and you decide if it's, let's say, head, you assign blue. If it's tail, you assign red. So this is the coloring scheme. So, so under this coloring scheme, let's try to see what happens if you, let's say you fix, so you fix a subset of vertices. So I will write the set of vertices of the graph Kn as V of Kn. Okay, so it's a subset of, S is a subset of the vertex set of Kn such that its cardinality is K. This K is the same K that you see here. Okay, so fix that. So so you have this random scheme of coloring. So what you can do is you can keep this S fixed, and every time you perform a, so for every instance or for every realization of the this random coloring, you can look at what is happening to S. That will also give you a distribution over the coloring of edges of S alone. Okay, so what is the probability that S is monochromatic. So the probability comes from the fact that you have a random coloring. So what is the probability that S is monochromatic? So what do you think this is going to be? So can you tell me? So S has k vertices. How many edges does S have then? Because it's an induced subgraph of K sub n. Say that again. KC2, right, K choose 2. And you want all of these edges to have the same color. Okay. So if you just fix one color, let's say blue, you want, let's say that you, instead of this, you look at probability that S is blue, all blue. Then what is it going to be? Right, so you have half to the power K choose 2. Okay. But then I'm asking for monochromatic. So now you times 2, right? Because it can be blue or it can be red. Okay. So this is something that you have for every fixed S. Okay. So now I'm going back and forth a lot. So if you have any trouble following, just let me just ask me. Okay. So what is the probability that under this random coloring, K sub n has a monochromatic K sub k? Okay, so if you want to write it in terms of these events, that S is monochromatic, how would you write this? So you are asking for the existence of at least one monochromatic K sub k, right? So existence of at least one. So what would this be? Probability of what? How would you write this? No, is it a plus or is, so I just want the, like, how would you interpret this event? Okay, so I am saying that there exists a monochromatic K sub k. Okay, so it could be any one of these S's. S can vary over all subsets of vertices of cardinality K in the vertex set of K sub n. So you're basically looking for the union of a bunch of events, aren't you? Okay, so basically you're looking for union over S, which is a subset of the vertex set of Kn, and such that its cardinality is K, okay? And then you have this event that S is monochromatic. Okay, so as long as one of these events holds, then this is true, right? And for this to be true, one of these events has to hold. So these two are the same things. So now what do you do? Yes. Correct. So now, I mean, this is of course a horrendous thing to try to compute. Perhaps we can refine the methods a little bit to get a more precise bound on this, but let's not go that far. Let's just start with something very commonly used, which is the union bound. So you can write that this is less than or equal to sum over, again, the same thing. If this is not visible, let me know, it's quite down here. Probability S is monochromatic. Okay, so what does this boil down to? From this and that. So what is this? So in here, you know what it is, right? It's that quantity. If you want me to like write it a little, maybe neater would be to write it like this. So inside the summation, you have this quantity for every S. Okay, so it's a summation of a bunch of terms. All these terms are the same. Okay, and how many terms are there? Correct. So this is going to be n choose k 2 to the power 1 minus k choose 2. Yes. So now this is the probability. This is, or rather, this is an upper bound on the probability that Kn has a monochromatic K sub k. Okay, so suppose now I give you this condition. So suppose n is such that, okay, so k is given to you. So n is such that n is such that this quantity here is less than 1. Okay? What does that tell you? If this quantity is less than 1, this is an upper bound on this quantity. So this quantity is also less than 1. What does that tell you? So the probability is, of course, with 0 and 1, but flip the event on its head, like make it complementary. So if probability of the event that Kn has a monochromatic K sub K is less than 1, then what is bigger than 0? Correct. So this tells you that the probability that Kn has no monochromatic K sub K, okay, this is strictly bigger than 0. What does that tell you? So now you make the transition from probability to deterministic. This is where, so we incorporated probability into a problem that does not have probability a priori in it. And we have gotten a conclusion. So when this condition holds, this is what you get. But now you have to make the transition back to deterministic world so that you can actually say something meaningful about the original problem. So what can you say here? If this probability is strictly bigger than 0, what does that tell you? Not for any n, but for n which satisfies this, yes, then. So there, or rather, this being strictly bigger than 0 means that the set of colorings possible for which there is no monochromatic K sub K is a non-empty set. Because an empty set would have probability 0. So this tells you that there exists a monochromatic coloring, sorry, not, I keep saying that, a 2 coloring, okay, of the edges of K sub n. I'm writing it loosely, but the edges, these are not vertices. So there exists a 2 coloring of K sub n such that there exists no, okay, monochromatic K sub K, okay? In other words, when n satisfies this inequality, it is too small for us to guarantee that when you perform any 2 coloring of the edges of K sub n, that there will be a monochromatic K sub K, either blue or red. So when you have this condition, you know that this n is not enough. Okay, so R sub RKK, this quantity, RKK is actually bigger than such an n. So you get a lower bound. So if I give you an n, you can compute this quantity and you can see if it's less than 1. If it is, then you say that, okay, this n is like RKK has to be strictly bigger than this n. This n does not suffice to guarantee the existence of a monochromatic K sub K in any 2 coloring of the edges of K sub n. Okay, so this is how you start with the problem which has no probability, but then we bring sort of like forcibly introduce a probability space, draw some conclusions, but after that you do have to make this transition, like from here to here. It's important that you go from here to here and then draw the final deterministic conclusion about your original problem. Okay, so is there like any question that you have about this or any comments that you have about this? Because I mean, this lecture would be like primarily looking at a bunch of examples. So I'll discuss like more such examples where, you know, we don't have probability, but we make use of probability as a tool. To me, that would be like just an interesting question combinatorially, you know, but I don't know if there are like computer science motivations for this. There could be, yeah. But even if there is, like, keep in mind that, you know, this really gives you a bound. So, and this bound may not be like a really great bound always. So then you have to like tweak the method to see if you can like get better bounds. So I think at this point, all the research about RKK goes into like finding more and more precise bounds for, and then how large you can make K and still continue. So I think that's what computers focus on, or people who work in this area focus on. Okay, so there are several such. So I start with Ramsey numbers because this is like a maybe people have heard of Ramsey numbers before. So it seems like a nice object to look at. But then there are several other examples, again, in graph theory, in number theory. So let's go through those. So here's one, and I will have to start erasing. So if that's okay. Okay, so we'll talk about something called tournaments. So tournaments, and for this one, if you ask a similar question, I can actually give you a better motivation than what I was able to give for Ramsey numbers from my own research. So tournaments are basically complete directed graphs. Okay, so what does that mean? So if you have a tournament T, okay, on let's say n vertices, okay, let's call these vertices U1, U2, so on up to UN. Okay, so then between any two of these vertices, any two distinct ones among these vertices, there is an edge, but the edge is directed. So if you take any I not equal to j, where I and j between 1 and n, then either you have the edge, the directed edge ui comma uj. So that means that, so if this is ui and if this is uj, then this is the edge. So going from ui towards uj. That's the notation that I generally use, but I mean, may not be like standard necessarily. Or you have uj comma ui, and in that case, it's the opposite direction. Okay, so one of them has to be present. That's why it's complete. And only one of them will be present, so no parallel directed edges. Okay. So this is what a tournament looks like. So why people study tournaments, if you ask? So one of the reasons I am interested in tournaments is because there is an ongoing project in which me and my friend Laura Slava, so we study some models from evolutionary biology. And the idea is that, so a lot of the time, this is called a tournament for a reason. And that's like this, when you have this edge, the interpretation could be that ui defeats uj in some game. Okay, that's one of the ways that you can interpret this kind of a directed graph. And where, every pair of teams play against each other. Okay, so in our model, we use tournaments to signify that there are a bunch of species of the same kind of animals. Okay, so the original question started with lizards, okay, different kinds of species of lizards coexisting in the same local environment. And then some of them they're able to adapt to the environment better than others. Some of them can beat the others in their, in their search for resources, etc. So in those situations, tournament models are helpful. Okay, so here is what I am interested in. So let's say you fix a positive integer k. Okay, and you say that a tournament t. Okay, so first of all, t has to have more than k plus 1 vertices in it, or players, if you want to talk about these vertices as players or teams. Say that a tournament T satisfies a property that we will call, let's say, SK, if for every subset S of the vertex set of T, okay, with S having cardinality K, there exists another vertex, so another, let's say V, okay, which is not in S. Okay? So that's T minus S or V of T minus S, however you want to write it, such that V defeats every player in S. Okay? Okay, so this is not always true. It's possible that you have a tournament in which there is a, let's say K is 3. Okay, so there aren't, there is a subset of vertices such that there is no other player outside of that subset that defeats all the players inside that subset. So basically, this is what we are looking for when we are, and this is important. This thing is important for every subset of K players inside the tournament. There is a vertex outside of this subset that defeats all the players inside the subset. So again, we are interested in trying to understand how big or how small n needs to be, n being the size of the vertex set of the tournament, such that you can guarantee something like this. Okay, so again, a priori, there is no probability in this statement. You're talking about tournaments, you're talking about cardinalities of tournaments, but no randomness. Okay, so now we incorporate randomness into it, and we do something fairly similar to what we have done here. Okay, so we will consider a random tournament capital T, and the randomness is defined in a very similar way to what I just erased. Okay, and that's as follows. So T, this is on n vertices. So again, the vertex set is this. So U1 through UN. And how is it random? So again, for, hopefully this is visible, let me know if it's not. So for I not equal to J, okay, between 1 and n. So you place an edge between UI and UJ, okay? So you let it be UI comma UJ, meaning it goes from UI towards UJ with probability half, okay? And you place UJ comma UI, which means now the edge goes from UJ towards UI, the opposite direction, with probability half. And you do this independently, okay? So independently over all such pairs. Okay, so this is how, again, it's a fairly straightforward construction because of the independence assumption and the fact that you do this uniformly randomly, half of probability. Okay, so now, once again, let's say you fix any S, which is a subset of the vertex set of the tournament, okay, with S having cardinality K. Okay, so this K is the same as, so keep in mind that you have to keep the K fixed. Otherwise, that's if you keep increasing K, then this doesn't work. So this K is fixed, and this is the same K that we consider here. Okay, so let's say that, so BS is, let's say it's the following bad event, that's why it's B sub S. Okay, what is that event? That there exists no vertex V, okay, which is in the tournament T, but outside of the subset S, okay, such that V defeats all players. All players are all vertices in S, okay. So this is a bad event. We don't want this to happen. That's why we call it bad. Okay, so for given fixing an S, which has cardinality K, you say that a bad event has happened with respect to S if there is no vertex V outside of S, which defeats all the players inside S. Okay, so now we want to calculate this probability first for a fixed S, first of all. Okay, not when we are varying S. Okay, so what is that going to be? Oh, I should use this. So just to illustrate, and here you also see how the independence assumption actually makes our life easier. So let's say that your, I called it S, right? So let's say your K is 4, okay? And this is your set S, okay? And let's say you have, can you see this is blue? It's kind of like probably not the best choice. So you have a couple of vertices here. Let's call it V1. Let's call this V2. And you are now trying to see if V1 defeats all of the vertices here, okay? V2 defeats all of the vertices here. Okay, so the probability, okay, that V1 does not defeat all players inside S. So what is that going to be? If V1 were defeating all the players inside S, then there will be like these arrows. Okay. So, and you know that all these arrows would have to be going from V1 towards the vertices in S, right? So what is the probability of this happening? Half to the power? Yeah, so let's say with respect to K, it's going to be half to the power K. If V1 were defeating all the vertices inside S, but you don't want, you're saying does not defeat, so 1 minus this. Okay. Now, if you notice carefully, this is where independence plays a role. So, okay, I should erase these edges. Notice that the edges that go from V1 to S are completely disjoint from the edges that go from V2 to S. And because of the way we have constructed this random tournament, these edges are all independent. Okay, they have nothing to do with each other. So what is the probability that V1 does not defeat all the players in S and V2 does not defeat all the players in S? That's going to be this squared, right? So the probability that Vi does not defeat all players in S, okay? So let me write for both I equal to 1 and 2. So that's simply going to be this thing, whole to the power squared. Okay, but now we want to do this for not just V1, V2, but all the remaining vertices of the tournament. So here you have K vertices, total number of vertices is N. So outside of S, you have N minus K vertices. So you want to do this for all of them. So instead of this, we are going to write that V does not defeat all players in S for every V, okay, every V which is in the tournament T, but not in S, okay? So this thing is going to then equal, so you have this probability, so 1 minus half to the power K, N minus K, okay? So in other words, so what is this event? This event is nothing but B sub S, right? Okay, so this, in other words, this is the probability of B sub S for every fixed S, okay? So now we are interested in finding the probability that there exists at least one such S for which BS holds, B sub S holds. Okay, so the probability that there exists S subset of the tournament with cardinality K such that B sub S holds. Okay. So again, this is about there exists. So you have the union over all S inside this probability. So that's the first step that you write. So this is going to be probability union over all S such that cardinality of S is K. Okay. B sub S. Okay. Again, you use the very simple union bound. So you can write this as sum over S subset of T, cardinality of S equal to K, probability of B sub S. Okay. And so what is this going to be? So, you know, probability of B sub S is this precisely for every S, for every such S which satisfies these two criteria. And how many such S's are there? Again, n choose K. So you have n choose K, 1 minus half to the power K, whole to the power n minus K. Okay. So now what happens if I tell you, so now this is the, I want to use a different chalk, maybe pink one. So now suppose you are given this criterion that this is less than 1. Okay, so this is your, so n is such that again K is fixed for you. Okay, so n is such that this holds. Then what do you know? So this tells you that the probability that there exists at least one subset S of cardinality K in the tournament such that B sub S holds is strictly less than 1. Which means, so if you again flip this on its head, basically you are getting probability that there exists no such S. So for every S subset of the tournament, cardinality of S equal to K, BS does not hold. Okay, so BS does not hold. Okay, so this is strictly bigger than 0. Okay, so in other words, again, this means that, so now is the time when you convert this probabilistic statement into something deterministic. So if this is strictly bigger than 0, so this basically tells you that there exists at least one tournament for which BS does not hold for every subset S of cardinality K. Okay, because this is strictly positive, so that set of tournaments is non-empty. So from here you could conclude that when n satisfies this criterion, it is enough to guarantee that there is a tournament that you can construct. So I'm not being able to tell you what tournament that is going to be. So algorithmically, this doesn't help you, but it helps you with the knowledge that it does exist. That if you give me an n for a given K, and I compute this and find that it's strictly less than 1, then I can conclude that, okay, this n is enough to guarantee that there exists a tournament, that we can construct a tournament on these n vertices for which this property Sk is true. Okay, so again, so this problem did not a priori have any probability involved, but we incorporate this, we introduce this probability space, and via that we make this conclusion. So we are getting a bound on this, okay, on the values of n. Okay, so these are a couple of examples. So how much time do I have? So it's almost time, is it? Huh? Oh, 16 minutes. Oh, okay, that's very cool. Didn't know you could do that. Okay, sure. Okay, so in 16 minutes, I'm thinking what other example to do. These are of like, these two are kind of like similar flavors, so I kind of want to try something a little different. So maybe I'll talk about something called dominating sets. Again, it's an application of probabilistic methods in graph theory. I think we did a very graph theory heavy discussion today. But I can tell you that so the primary book that I consult for this kind of stuff, and there are many, many papers, of course, starting with Erdish. I think he is the one who is kind of the pioneer in this field of like introducing probability into problems in combinatorics, graph theory, number theory, and getting answers or bounds. So the book that I primarily rely on is the one that's written by my advisor, Professor Joel Spencer and Professor Noga Alon. So it's called the probabilistic method. And there are many, many aspects to this whole subject. So, I mean, if you refer to the book, you also learn things about random graphs in general. That's a nice reference to consult. So let's talk about dominating sets. But do you have any questions that may have something on your mind you want to ask or share? Otherwise, so you can think about it while I'm erasing the board. So this is what I tell my students when I teach. So if something comes to mind, please let me know once I'm done erasing this. Anything that you? Yes. Yeah, so that's something that's like, I haven't like exactly worked that out, but that's like something definitely worth exploring. For the Ramsey number case, maybe it's something that you can explore when you're not necessarily looking at RKK, but RKL. Maybe that helps. So yeah, but that's a really good question. So sometimes we don't do a half-half thing. So this example that we're going to talk about, we don't like make things like uniform. So this example, anything else? Oh, yes, yeah. Who's asking? Oh, I can, sorry. In the evolutionary model, we don't generally have that. Like one species is usually more dominating than the other species. So it makes sense to look at tournaments as opposed to, and tournaments are like, in this case, I mean, simple directed graphs, as opposed to something where you have parallel edges. So that would be like my thought. Again, I'm not a biologist, but like, so what Laura does is like she communicates with her biology friends, and then like we construct the model. Something that they seem happy with. So yeah, I guess that's good. Okay, so this in this example, so we talk about something called the dominating set in a graph. So you have a graph. So I'm talking about simple graphs here. Okay, so no loops, no parallel edges, simple things. So this is the vertex set, this is the edge set. And let's say that S is a subset of V. So you call this subset dominating. If for every V which is not in S, so V minus capital V minus S, V is adjacent to at least one vertex in S, okay? So previously, so note the difference here. Previously, we were talking about the existence of a vertex outside of the subset that we chose that defeated all of the vertices inside the subset. Here, we are just asking that there is at least one neighbor of V in capital S. Okay, so I mean, for example, a silly example would be that you have a graph and you take all vertices of the graph in your S except one, and this one vertex that you leave out is not an isolated vertex. Then of course that set is a dominating set. But ideally what you would like is dominating sets that are as small as possible, because that's economical. If you want something like this property, then the challenge is when this S is quite small, okay, and still retains this property. Okay, so we kind of like want the existence of a dominating set which has some upper bound on its size. Okay, so given a graph, so here the graph is given, you're not like constructing the graph, like unlike the previous case where you were constructing a tournament randomly. Here the graph is given and you are being asked, okay, so can you guarantee the existence of, so under certain conditions, of course, can you guarantee the existence of a dominating set of a given maximum size? Okay, so there is an upper bound on the size of the dominating set. So the only condition that we assume, so let's just say that the number of vertices in the graph is n, that's fine. And the other condition that we assume is that the minimum degree of G is some delta. Okay, so this delta is specified to you, but it's bigger than 1. Okay, so that's something that you assume. Okay, so that's not much of a condition, you know, that's not a very strong condition. So given this setup, here's how we can, again, this problem a priori doesn't have any probability, but here's how we can incorporate probability and get some conclusion out of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first choose a random subset of this graph, of the vertex set of this graph. Okay, so we'll choose a random subset, capital X of V. And how do we do that? So the idea is that choose, or shouldn't say choose, maybe write include. So include every vertex V in capital V, okay? So every vertex V in capital V in the subset capital X with probability P, okay? This P is not specified. So here we're not taking P to be half. We will see what P is going to be. So with some probability P, which is between 0 and 1, and don't include it. So exclude with probability 1 minus P, okay? And you do this independently over all the vertices of capital V, okay? So independently over all small v in capital V. Okay? Again, this independence assumption is going to be helpful. So, you know, you can think of this as almost like, if you're familiar with this terminology, it's almost you're doing a site percolation with probability P, if that makes any sense. Otherwise, ignore that comment. Okay, so this is how we create the subset X. Okay, so you basically take every vertex and you have a coin which lands head with probability P, tail with probability 1 minus P. And these coins are like independent over all the vertices. So you toss the coin, if it lands head, include it in your subset X, otherwise exclude it. Okay, so the next thing that we do is we define Y sub capital X. Okay, you can just define it as Y. I'm writing it like that because there is a dependence on capital X. So this is because it's dependent on capital X, this is also going to be a random set. Okay, so this is a set of all Y in capital V such that Y does not have a neighbor in capital X. So what are we doing? So we first generate capital X. For every realization of capital X, you get a Y sub X by simply considering those vertices Y in capital V that do not have any neighbor in capital X for that particular realization of capital X. So this also is a random, ultimately it's going to be a random subset of the graph because X is random. And notice that if you look at X union Y sub X, this is you're looking for dominating sets. Is this a dominating set? So where did I write dominating set? I think maybe I erased it. Okay, maybe I erased that. So dominating set, again, like if you recall, so basically that means that, or maybe I wrote it there. No, I erased it, sorry. Oh, here, okay, yeah. So this is a dominating set because if you look at any vertex which is outside of this set, so you have already taken care of the bad vertices by looking at y sub x, right? So y sub x already has all those vertices that did not have any neighbor in capital X. So now once they're included in this set, this whole thing then becomes, this is a dominating set. So we have gotten our hands on a dominating set. So now and it's a random dominating set. So now can we talk about its size by looking at its expectation? So this is also the first time that we are really considering expectation. So far we haven't looked at that. Okay, so, and how do we go about it? So I'll erase this. I should mention that this is V minus X. So Y sub X is all those vertices that are not in X, outside of X, and have no neighbor in capital X. So, okay, so what we want to compute now, or at least bound, is expectation of the size of this dominating set. Okay. And because X and because of the way we have defined Y sub X, so Y sub X is disjoint from X. So this thing is the same as do you agree? Because they are disjoint, so you can add their cardinalities. That will give you the cardinality of their union. And now what can you write? Correct. So expectation is linear. So you can just write this as sum of the individual expectations. Okay. So what is expectation of the cardinality of X? Can you tell me? From the way we have constructed this? So this is something useful. I am saying this because some of these techniques are actually going to be helpful in other kinds of problems as well. So when you want to compute this thing, can you write this thing as the following? If the notation is not familiar, please ask, I'll explain the whole thing. You understand this? This is the indicator function for the event that V is in capital X. What does this mean? This is a random variable which takes the value 1 if V is in capital X, otherwise it's 0. Okay, so if you sum over all the V's, then this gives you the cardinality of capital X. Okay, and now you can again use linearity of expectation because it's a sum inside the expectation, bring it outside, right? So then you have, this is sum over all the vertices of the graph, of the entire graph, and then expectation indicator that V is in capital X. This thing is nothing but the probability that V is in capital X, because this is 1 when V is in capital X, 0 otherwise. Okay, so this is sum over all V, this. And what is the probability that V is in capital X? P. Okay, how many V are there? N. So this is NP. Okay. And then how would you go about computing this? So first what we do is we find the probability, okay, that so for any vertex V, which is in capital V, what is the probability that V is in Y sub X? Okay, so there are two things to do. The first thing is that V cannot be in X itself, right, from the definition. So V cannot be in X, none of its neighbors can be in X. Okay, so this is nothing but the probability that V does not belong to X and no neighbor of V is in X. So you can write this more mathematically. I'm writing it like because we are sort of trying to have a conversation. So V cannot be in X and none of the neighbors of V can be in X. Then by definition, V will be in Y sub X. Okay. Notice that because of the way we have constructed X, So here is where independence plays a role. Okay. So the probability that these vertices of V is a given vertex. You know its neighbors. Okay, so let's say that you have V here, and you have, let's say, 3 neighbors of V. Okay, those are like, let's say, U1, U2, U3. So this is given because the graph is given. Okay, you want all of them to be absent in capital X because the construction of capital X happened independently over the vertices. So this basically means nothing but, so this is probability that V is not in X, and then product over all the, so by this I mean U is adjacent to V, okay? All the neighbors of V, U is not in X. This product you can write only because of the independence assumption, otherwise you couldn't have, okay? So what is the probability that a vertex is not in S is 1 minus P, right? So you basically get here 1 minus P whole to the power. So you have 1 factor here, and then here, all the neighbors. So you can write this as the degree of V in G, okay? But we have made an assumption here. The minimum degree is delta. So the degree of V is greater than or equal to delta, okay? But 1 minus P is less than 1. So you get an upper bound, which is 1 minus P to the power delta plus 1. So you see why the upper bound is there? Because 1 minus P is less than 1. Okay, and degree of V is greater than or equal to delta. So you get this, and now we can compute the expectation of the cardinality of y sub x. And it's now it's the same idea as that's what we used for the cardinality of x. So expectation of the cardinality of y sub x is, again, sum over all V in capital V, the indicator function or the indicator random variable of this event, that V is in y sub x. Okay, so if I write it directly, so you have seen the steps there. So if I write it directly, this is going to be this. Yes, again, we made use of the linearity of expectation and the fact that expectation of this quantity is nothing but this probability. So now you get an upper bound here because you get an upper bound there. So it's not exactly equal, it's an upper bound. So that upper bound is going to be, so n because you have this sum, times 1 minus P whole to the power delta plus 1. So what does that tell you? That tells you that if you now look at cardinality of this dominating set, you have the following upper bound. So NP from here, okay, and then plus NP plus n times 1 minus P to the power delta plus 1. So this is true for every P, okay? But now what we can do is we can choose P so that this is optimized. Okay, so that optimization step you can, like, do, I think, in various ways. So I think that in this particular case, if I remember right, I think this is also by Erdős, if I remember right. What he does is he uses this inequality. And so that will give you, this is NP plus e to the power minus P delta plus 1, okay? Sorry, n, forgot. And now you optimize, you minimize this with respect to as a function of P. Okay, so whatever that comes out to be, that's like not the point. So it comes out to be something. So let's say after you optimize this, you end up getting, so optimum P, let's say that leads to expectation of the cardinality of this dominating set is less than equal to some capital T. Okay, whatever that is. Again, you now make the leap from probabilistic to deterministic. So if the expectation of a random variable is bounded above by this, that tells you that the probability that this random variable takes a value less than or equal to d is actually strictly positive. Okay, so in this particular case, it's a discrete random variable, right? So this is basically a bunch of, so this takes a positive integer value. Okay, so that tells you that with positive probability, this random variable will have a realization which is less than d. Okay, and that again, you come back to deterministic setup. That tells you that there has to be a dominating set, which is whose size is bounded above by capital D. All we require is this condition. Okay, so this capital D, I can tell you, is probably something like this. Again, I don't remember exactly, but this is your capital D. So it's a function of n and delta. But the important thing is that you found something with only this much assumption, and by going from the bound on the expectation to saying that, that means that this random variable can take a value which is less than or equal to d with positive probability. And that tells you that there is such a dominating set which exists. Again, because positive probability implies that that particular set is non-empty. Okay, so this is another instance where I hope that I was able to now I'm out of time, right? Okay, I think I ended did I end a lot after time, or is it? Okay. So, so there are many other examples, and if you want to talk about those, I'm happy to say whatever little I know. So it's not really exactly my area of research, so I might not know a lot of stuff, but I'm happy to have conversations.
Yeah, so if anybody has questions, please go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. Oh, yeah. So you got this one? Okay, so now this is basically, so the number of factors in this product will be the degree of V, right? Because that's the number of neighbors of V. So you basically get this thing, 1 plus degree of V in G. Now degree of V in G is greater than or equal to delta, because you assume that the minimum degree in G is delta. Okay, so that's why, so degree of V is greater than or equal to delta. So 1 plus degree of V is greater than or equal to delta plus 1. But now the inequality reverses because this is less than 1. That's why, yeah. Okay, anything else? Yeah.
Ma'am, you told about the concept of tournament. So the genes which we have read in biology, the recessive dominant gene,
Right.
that's are also based on this only. Means there one gene dominate the other, like
so
tall,
there is
short.
dominating and recessive genes.
Genes.
Yeah. So I don't know if that's necessarily modeled by tournaments. I'm not entirely sure again.
And
I
where
wish I
are
knew
the
more
other
about-
places tournaments used basically?
I mean, I guess they're used in sports a lot, but yeah, that's the, but I mean, in my work, I only used it in this setup, but yeah, I cannot think of other less obvious areas where tournaments get used.
Thank you.
Yeah, so can we extend the concept of tournaments to food webs, where we think of the vertex outside the set to be a top carnivore,
Right?
and the rest of them to be
That basically is so one of the reasons why we use tournaments in my research is that. So
right.
yeah, there is also that. Yeah.
Okay.
So I think there will be slight variations if you look at one of the species exhausting resources, or the other cannot keep up, and this that he just said, I think the food pyramid, I guess you would call this, but they are similar. The understanding is kind of similar. That so whichever is the top the apex predator will kind of sure.
Okay, so if there are no more questions, let us thank Professor Moumanti for her very fascinating talk.
Thank you.